Greetings, one and all, to yet another video in this little series I've decided to call The Creation Of. In this video, I'll be talking about the progress of me making the third book in my spooky story series, being Spooky Stories: The Rise of Flamestrosity. Without further ado, allow me to begin. For a majority of this book, along with the books I have yet to talk about, most of the information was thought of when I was trying to either go to sleep or when I was on the bus ride to school and back home. It was like a little movie that would play out in my head, which I would then eventually write out on my computer. While I tried to remember most of the information my brain cooked, some of it was sadly lost due to me not being able to remember every little detail, while other ideas ended up not making it to the final because I didn't think they would fit all that well. As I've already explained, not much changed with the original plot of this story compared to the final. While making Spooky's Adventure and Ghost King's Revenge, I didn't really know what I was doing with the series. I didn't even know this was going to be a series. These two stories weren't even connected. But here, with Book 3, is when I began to connect the dots, and everything started falling into place. By the time I began thinking about Book 3, Books 1 and 2 were already changed and set to take place in the same fictional universe, with Book 3 picking up a year after the events of Book 2. This is going based off of the Ghost Realm passage of time. Some minor tweaks were made here and there, but the basic plot remained the same. Without spoiling anything, the basic plot for this book is the protagonists from Book 2 were all fixing any damage that had been caused by the previous book's antagonist. They all then traveled back to the animal realm in order to relax, though an evil arises from right under their non-existent noses. This evil certainly being a shock, and the most dangerous entity they've all faced yet, with it threatening to destroy all of the realms. Focusing on the new characters that appear in this book, we have a much smaller cast of new faces compared to the first two books. One of these new characters being Potato Bird. I believe the whole reason why I made her was because I jokingly wanted to combine two things I thought was neat, being potatoes and birds. Pumpkin Bat was made a short while after Potato Bird. From what I remember, a friend of mine suggested that I make another character like Potato Bird, but Halloween themed. Thus, I combined a jack-o'-lantern and a bat. The third new addition to the cast is Thomas the Tomato, or Thomas for short. He was first made from an art project back in my 9th grade school year. I don't remember exactly what the project was about, but I know we had to paint an eye in the middle of a canvas and then do other random things around it. My finished painting was this. Of course, with me being in the character designing mode that year, I took the red diamond with a singular eye and gave it some floating limbs. I always called him a tomato for some reason, and another one of my friends suggested I name him Thomas. I then combined both ideas, which is how he ended up with his full name, Thomas the Tomato. The fourth new character to appear is Neo. Oh boy. This man sure has a history to his creation. Originally, yes, Neo was a Kirby OC. I originally made him because I wanted to draw Magalore in my art class, but I was too nervous that I'd get in trouble for drawing a character owned by HAL Laboratory. This, of course, was rather stupid of past me. I was just doodling in my sketchbook, not doing anything for an actual project that would be graded. For some context, we weren't allowed to draw pre-existing characters such as Mario or Pikachu for assignments specifically, as that would be considered stealing someone else's work for a grade or something along those lines. Anyway, going back to Neo, I decided to keep the character around and would go on to use him in a little project that ended up dying within the span of about a month. I didn't want to just abandon him though, so I thought I'd use him in my Spooky Stories book series instead. I decided to change his design some, with his color scheme being the first to change. I had just ripped colors from other characters in the Kirby series for Neo's original lore. After changing his color scheme, I decided to give him a second unhooded form. I was hoping that by doing this, Neo wouldn't be called things like a Magalore ripoff. Some time passed, and I thought I'd change Neo's design again, which is the final design that's seen now. Additionally, to help Neo fit into the Spooky Stories universe, Potato Bird, Pumpkin Bat, and Thomas the Tomato are all entities commonly referred to as Neo's 3 creations. These 4 are always found with one another, with Neo acting as the 3's parental or guardian figure. The final new character to appear is the main big bad itself, Flamestrosity. Unlike the other characters I've talked about, I don't have any sort of specific reason for making it. The only sort of reason I can remember is I wanted a character that didn't really have a definite physical form, at which I drew random lines, and Flamestrosity appeared.
What a happy creature.
While I've said many times now that not much changed with the original plot of this story, some smaller things did, in fact, change. One of these smaller things being Phantom's sword. In the original version of TROF, Phantom's sword didn't speak. In fact, it just didn't work at all or do anything when he and his friends were locked in a room with no escape. As I was giving the book one last read before publishing it, I sat and thought about this, considering the lore behind his sword. I realized that it just not working, period, didn't really make any sense. And so I decided to change that scene just a smidge, giving life to Phantom's sword.
And definitely not making it more ominous, no!
An idea that I remember originally thinking of, but didn't make it to the final, was a scene that involved Dream and the main antagonist of this book. The scene went something like this. Dream had been captured and was being held in place by Flamestrosity. Because Flamestrosity feeds off of negative emotions, as Dream was being held in place, she was being drained of energy and began saying negative, pessimistic things, like how the heroes weren't going to win this battle, how this fight was all for nothing, and so on. I believe it was either Nightmare or Phantom that was trying to snap her out of it, at which she was then released, and the big battle continued. As for why this scene was dropped from the final, I didn't really know how to make it work as I was originally writing book 3. To me, it didn't make sense for why Dream would be saying these negative things. She's usually very optimistic and tries to cheer up the group, like Spooky if anyone was down. Looking back now, this would certainly have been a very interesting and rather chilling scene, seeing the usually happy, bubbly Dream defeated and hopeless. In the end though, part of me is glad I didn't add this scene because there's already a lot of things happening in this fight already. Speaking of, this book is certainly one of the longest books I've written. In fact, when I first wrote it, I originally broke its script in 2. I figured this would have been easier to animate rather than have this massive, daunting script. When Spooky Stories became a book series though, I decided to combine the 2 parts together instead. Another small change that was made relatively early on this time is when Midnight and another character, whose identity I will keep secret for spoiler reasons, appear on Fortitude, the Dragon Realm, with Phantom. In the original version, Midnight and this other character were going to appear as holograms. I then quickly made the realization that technology doesn't exist in this fictional universe, minus a flashlight, an old-style camera, and a certain robotic creature. With this in mind, these 2 being holograms didn't make sense, so I changed the scene to where Midnight and the other mystery character actually appeared on the realm instead. And last, but certainly not least, Neo. Again. He has been through so many changes, character design and lore-wise since he's been around, and sadly, I don't want to talk about most of these changes until Book 4 releases, but know that he did have changes to his entire lore, multiple times. In Book 3 specifically, nothing really changed with Neo, apart from him actually being able to cause some harm to the big bad when it had made itself pretty much invincible. This was changed from him being able to do nothing because of yet another something I'd rather not reveal yet. I thought I'd bring up Neo since he was introduced in this book, though again nothing with him really changed specifically when he appears in Book 3. And there we have it. If anyone is interested in getting your own copy of Book 3, as well as Books 1 and 2, they can be found on thebookpatch.com. A link to all 3 books has been put in the description below. A link has also been put to my comic, Nameless and the Shapeshifter, which is the story that occurs right after the events of Book 3. I'm also planning on making a video like this for Nameless and the Shapeshifter too. Thank you all so much for watching and for your support of this series. Oh, right! And I suppose I could make this joke too. I haven't seen you guys since last year!